Hey everybody, Dan Ward here. Welcome back to this series of videos about accelerating defense acquisitions. In this video, we're going to talk about risk, not from a philosophical point of view, but from a very practical, analytical point of view. There's a widespread perception that going fast is risky. The Facebook motto used to be move fast and break things. Other groups say stuff like fail early and often, or we're going to take a lot of chances and break a lot of glass. This whole concept that going fast is super risky or that acceleration is failure prone, this concept is pretty pervasive, but it's backwards. The data and the logical analysis we're about to walk through actually show that going slow tends to break things in unacceptable ways. Going slow exposes us to unacceptable risks. So let's dive in. You may be familiar with this risk matrix. It's a pretty typical mechanism for depicting a program's risks in terms of the likelihood and the consequence of a variety of risk events. We'll start with the x-axis, the consequences of a negative outcome. Now, fast projects sometimes experience a negative risk event, and sometimes they fail completely. But the consequences of these failures tends to be low compared to slower projects. Here's why. Going faster reduces our investment of time, of money, and that means our exposure to loss is smaller when our schedule is accelerated. If we spend just a few hours and $100 on a little experiment and it doesn't work out, we've only lost a few hours and $100. The consequences are low. So all else being equal, the consequences of failure on a fast project are less severe than the consequences of failure on a slow project. Partly because our investment is low, so our exposure to loss is reduced, but also because going fast gives us time to recover and try again. In contrast, when the timeline extends, when we've invested more time, then the consequence of failure goes up. When you spend a decade on a project, it hurts a lot when that project fails, and it's harder to catch up. So acceleration moves us to the left in our risk matrix. Now let's take a look at the other dimension of the risk matrix, the y-axis, labeled likelihood. This is also improved by going faster. It's a longer discussion than we can go into right now, but there is significant data showing that projects with short schedules are less likely to fail. There are several reasons for this, but one of the main reasons is that faster projects present a smaller target to the forces of change. When you have a short timeline, your project is less exposed to changes in technology, changes in the threat environment, to economic changes, leadership changes, workforce changes. So all else being equal, accelerating the schedule reduces the likelihood of those negative events that can lead to failure. When you go fast, it is less likely that some new technology will make yours obsolete, or that the threat or the needs will change before you deliver the capability. In contrast, when you have a long timeline, your project gets exposed to a lot of changes. And those changes can mean you end up delivering something that's operationally irrelevant or technologically obsolete, or both. So that means speed reduces the likelihood of failure. It moves us down in the risk matrix. So let's put those together. If we reduce the likelihood and the consequence of failure, we are moving down and to the left, from the red towards the green. That's the direction we want to go in. So when we talk about acceleration, we can legitimately present it as a risk mitigation strategy, not some high wire act. Of course, there's more to it than these few slides can cover. We could spend hours talking about the relationship between speed and risk. I've written and published a lot of stuff on that topic. But in this short video, I'm just talking about general trends and tendencies. Your mileage may vary. My point here is simply that when we do the analysis, the results might be surprising. So let's do that analysis. Let's not assume that speed is automatically risky. Before we move on, let me just add one other nuance. Going fast can introduce some new risks into our programs. That's the little red arrow pointing up and to the right. But going faster also removes some big, gnarly old risks. That's the big green arrow pointing down and to the left. So the net effect is what we should focus on. The net change to our risk profile tends to be an improved risk posture. Look, humans are not always great at risk analysis. We tend to pay way too much attention to the new risks, like that little red arrow, and too little attention to the reduction of old risks. That's the big green one. We don't always do the vector analysis. Now, the point of all of this is not to avoid all risk or to only do low risk stuff or to never introduce or accept a new risk. Instead, it's just to say that we should have some thoughtful discussions about the real relationship between speed and risk, and to actually do the analysis, do all the math, and resist the superficial bumper sticker that says speed is risky, because a lot of times it isn't. In our next video, we're going to talk about the relationship between speed and complexity.